welcome back to Brothers of the Serpent, a podcast of limitless conversations between two limited individuals. From inside our 10 by 10 by 10 cube, we endeavor to think outside the box. Resisting our collective cry of, "You are not my father!" we attempt to accept the unacceptable, to entertain for a moment the seemingly impossible. For who are we amidst the infinite to demand the finite? Alas, we are but Snake Bros! Snake Bros! Prepare your ears to behold Episode 5.
Episode 5.
Dun, 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 dun. Bum, bum.
See that bumper music? It's awesome.
Yeah. All right, what's on the agenda for Episode 5? Let's see. We've got...
Well, I'm really glad that we're doing, like, earlier today, the work I was doing that machine. Oh, my God. I was basically driving a machine across a field and turning on a switch whenever I saw weeds in the grass. And man, like, my phone's broken. I had no podcast, nothing to listen to, nothing to do, and it was putting me to sleep. I had you look at did you see the tracks I was making in the field? I get passing out, I wake up, oh shit. So I'm glad for this, some mental exercise here. It's gonna be way better.
First, mental push-ups. One.
Okay. I'm done.
I'm ready to go.
So what about the news? What's up in the news? Have you seen anything in the news? Like secret UFOs passing the ISS, getting cameras turned off?
That happens all the time.
Yeah, like every day.
I did read something where they dug up a bunch of mummies somewhere in near. It was in Giza, near the Valley of Kings.
New tomb they found.
Yeah.
I don't know anything. I haven't read the article, but I've seen that on the feed. Yeah.
Yeah, it was supposedly some kind of royal, or not royal. What do they call it?
Like elites, but
elite. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole family buried in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are really cool. The burial rituals that started out, which is presumably just the pharaoh, like eventually spread to the entire culture. So they were all doing it.
I was looking at some of the pictures of the sarcophagus or whatever that they were uncovering, and it has all these hieroglyphs and everything painted on it. It's real pretty
and everything. Yeah,
I was just wondering, like, when they analyze all of that writing on the various sarcophagi, do they usually say the same thing, or are they telling the story of the person's life, or is it like mostly like the same kind of, like at a funeral, it's typical for people to read, similar verses from scripture and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, there's, as far as I know, this is just, I'm not saying this for sure, but as far as I know, there will be certain passages from the book of what is in the Duat, the book of the dead.
Okay, yeah.
And then there will be
book of the dead.
Yeah, the Duat. There will be some things about the person too, right? Mixed in. So it's like little phrases and stuff. And then, dude, on the inside of the lids are also a bunch of written things like,
Let me out! Let me get out of here!
If you're reading this, stay calm.
Oh my God! No,
I don't. No, but they are instructions.
Instructions. Yes, stay calm.
That's right. First of all, stay calm. Second, you're dead. Stay calm.
Just think of Orion.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. That on the inside there will be, and then so if you're wealthy enough to have your own,
it's a manual for becoming a star.
That's right. That's right. Egyptians only became stars.
I kind of feel weird laughing about that right now, but it's that's comedy for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was because I've always said that the Book of the Dead, or the Book of What is in the Duat, if you look at it, and this is partially because of like it's mixing like sort of
looks like a platform video game.
Yeah, it's Atari fucking video game culture with Egyptian wall drawings, explaining how to all these things you have to do in the to get to the House of Millions of Years or whatever to ascend into godhood. And of course, it's 2D, and everybody's flat, and it looks like a platform jumper. So it's like it's like, one of those books you buy that has all the secrets for the game. Here's how you got to jump here and like land on this turtle and bounce off that, and like like you land in this boat that takes you across here, and you jump onto this cloud, and then you get the star. You know,
It's weird that they would put all of that work and effort into instruction on what to do after you die. Like, how do they learn what you're supposed to do?
Well, yeah. So,
it's weird.
So NDEs, okay, so theoretically, well, not theoretically, but there's a certain line of thinking that they purposefully practice the art of near-death experience. And this is where the phrase "born again" comes from. Like the idea to be born again is like you go through this ritual, and it's a 3-day deal, and you die, and like so like everybody knows, like from seeing various movies or whatever, that Skull and Bones, these secret societies have this thing where you wake up in a coffin, and you're like, what the hell? You open the coffin and you get out. It's like that's a like a sort of a remnant of this tradition where they would actually die. So you'd either drink something that puts you very close to death, or they would drown you. This is like baptism.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Like it's basically waterboarding. You drown the guy.
For anybody out there that's ever watched Game of Thrones, there's or read the books, there's one sort of religious culture there on these islands out in the ocean, and they worship what they call the drowned god.
Oh yeah.
And one of the rituals that they practice for every initiate is they dunk them in the water until they drown. Like, they hold them down underwater until they drown, and then they drag them up onto shore out of the ocean and lay them down. And if they come back, when they cough up the water or whatever, and they come back,
born again.
Exactly, they're born again, and they believed that they died.
Yeah.
And that if you don't come back, then you weren't worthy.
You weren't worthy.
Yeah.
The two most common causes of near-death experience are cardiac arrest and drowning. Cardiac arrest is obviously not something that you want to induce. I guess you could induce it if it's like some electrodes on your head or something. You could give yourself a heart attack, but
don't you have a heart attack when you drown anyway?
No. Well, I don't think so. I don't think you go into cardiac arrest. You basically just suffocate.
Oh yeah. Asphyxiation.
Yes, it's asphyxiation by inundation.
Coroner's report. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks, guy. He drowned. Okay, got it. And think of that. You're born again because if you've ever read or listened to any near-death experience reports, no matter what they saw, like some people think they meet Jesus, other people think they meet their family members, other people think they meet the Buddha, whatever. Or some people just experience light and love, right? The point is that at some point in the experience, they reach a point, well, I keep saying point, but they reach a place where whoever they're with, whether it's an entity of love and light, or it's their grandmother, or it's Jesus or Buddha or whatever, turns to them and says, beyond this point, you cannot return. And so they're either given a choice, right? They're either said, like, you can come with us, but you cannot return past this point. And it'll be a lot of times there's a symbol of a bridge over water or something. There's a symbol there of crossing something, going through a wall, through a door, go over a stream or whatever. But there's always a symbol of you. Once past this point, you can't return. And a lot of people are given a choice. Do you want to continue with us, or do you want to go back? And of course, we only hear the stories of the people that come back. So there's always then they suddenly remember all of these responsibilities. They've got kids, or they have, or there's this person that is going to be devastated if they die, or they had to do this. They wanted to complete this project or whatever. And just that thought begins to draw them away, and they feel, or they're not given a choice. Somebody will still turn to them at this point at the river or whatever, the bridge, and they'll say, but it's not your time. You must return. And then they get sucked back into it. So, and then you wake up in this damaged physical shell that you just left, and all the descriptions of that are like you were this it's very genie-like, phenomenal cosmic powers, but they get jammed. Like there's a feeling of a crunching, like down a funnel. People describe it as being squeezed down into a funnel into this tight, and that being put back in the human body, because they came out and they were just like, oh my God, you feel awesome. You're expanded and everything. You're just your entire soul, yourself, whatever it is, and then you have to come back to this physical shell, and it's always a squeezing. There's always a loss. Like they knew stuff when they were there, and now when they're back, they can remember that they knew stuff, but they also know that it was lost when they were getting squeezed back into the shell. So the point of that whole description is that the Egyptians appear to have really studied this and purposefully like sent people on expeditions in NDEs to go, to get in, basically because they're like, okay, so what is this deal? Like, you die and you go to this. It'll look different for different people, but there's all these similarities that kind of imply that it is a place that it has, so you can imagine that if there was a serious scientific expedition or project to study this, and we were inducing death or near death experience, like by drowning or whatever, just inducing death in people, and they would go and have this experience and come back, and then we would record it.
How dare you suggest we waterboard ourselves?
Yeah. I'll tell you everything you want to know. Good. Tell me about the death. How did you come back?
It works.
Trying to figure out how to get past this next platform.
Dedicated scientists.
Do you jump on the cloud or the bridge? Do you grab the feather or the heart?
So, yeah, I had an experience years ago that I had never had any discussions about near-death experiences with you before, or really even thought about it, but I was having this very spiritual moment. I was laying in bed and I was going to sleep, and I've always been fascinated with not so much death, but what is after, right? Where does my consciousness go? Like, what happens?
Nowhere. Goes into blackness and nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't been interested for that reason. So, I don't believe that my consciousness ends with the death of the physical body.
Right. I mean, if energy can't be destroyed, like, what? How can you just end?
Yeah, and I've had experiences, many experiences throughout my life with God, or some intelligence that's beyond the physical realm, whatever you would call it. I call it God or angels or whatever.
Do you believe?
I believe in God.
I believe.
So yeah, this night I was basically praying, but my focus was on curiosity about what is the afterlife, and I was asking, like, show me what it is. Show me what, right? Those
are always best.
Yeah, very dangerous question to be asking.
Kung Fu. Show me.
Yeah. So yeah, I was asking that, and this sounds cliche, but I felt an answer that was okay, but if you want to see, do not open your eyes.
Wow.
So I was like, all right, and I remember, and this is the cliche thing, is starting to see like this bright light. Okay. And everybody describes that. And I don't know.
That's not cliche. That's indicative of a real experience.
Okay. So I started seeing the bright light. And then at some point it felt like, when you're laying down to go to sleep or whatever, and you have your eyes closed, there can be all kinds of pictures and just things like flowing before your mind's eye.
Yeah.
Sort of in a parade. That's happens to me. But anyway, that all kind of went away, and there was this light, and it was kind of out of the picture. So I was seeing kind of like if you were looking into binoculars and the moon is like nearby, you're looking at the night sky,
right,
you start to see this.
Yeah.
And it started coming in more and more. And at some point when the light was getting more and more powerful, I started noticing my heartbeat was literally slowing down. It was getting slow and slow and slow.
Yeah. So if you want to know what happens after death, you have to die.
Yeah. And there came this one point where it was too long since the last time my heart beat. And I freaked out. And I opened my eyes and like, boom, my heart started going, do. Yeah, I was just like, oh. Came out of the whole thing and I was like, dang it. I messed it up.
You were going to kill me.
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of like this mixed thought like, okay, so yeah, if you want to know about it, you're going to die.
So God's a practical joker. Sure, I'll show you, buddy. Just keep your eyes closed.
But yeah, it's you were talking about how they're given a choice. Well, I was too in that scenario, which was if you want, it was an ultimatum. If you want to know, don't open your eyes. I don't know if that's considered an ultimatum, but that was
I think that was. I don't know. I mean, that's really fascinating because there's all kinds of ways you could look at that. Like, it could have been inducing an altered state.
But since then, we've practiced. We endeavored into hypnotism.
Yeah.
Hypnosis with each other. We learned about hypnosis and some methods, and we practiced it on each other. And I remember, going down like in the hypnotic state and feeling very similar things, like my heart rate slowing down. And
yeah. And that was on command too. Like, very strange when that's happening.
Right.
When the person is telling you, you feel your heart slowing down and you feel like a whoop, whoop.
Yeah. And also you kind of lose the feeling of your body once you get down far enough and you're just kind of floating. And that's exactly the way I felt. So it was like it was almost like I was going to sleep while aware.
Right.
And that experience changed the way I think about whatever the afterlife is or what might happen.
You were basically, you didn't necessarily have a near-death experience, but you experienced the sensation of coming very close to death, and yet your consciousness, your awareness was as pure and as bright as ever.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, okay, so I was dying in conventional sort of mechanistic, like materialist science. I should have been able to think almost nothing. My heart had slowed almost down, like no blood going to the brain. I should have been like, but instead you were like, holy crap, my heart's, and you're like analyzing all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, so that does change just that little, think of that little
glimpse.
Piece, that little glimpse, that little sliver of a near-death experience vastly changes your entire concept.
So I kind of want to explain like the concept that I have now that it's basically like a theory. Like I can't know what's going to happen, but I've kind of worked out like this idea that I think is really cool.
Yeah.
About what would happen. But anyway.
No, go for it. Let's hear it.
Okay, so I started thinking that, when you're going to sleep, sometimes you'll enter the dream state like very close to sleep. If you've ever been woken up shortly after you've fallen asleep.
Yeah.
There's times when I've been woken up where when I was woken up, I couldn't really tell, was I actually asleep or not? Because I could remember things that were happening in the room.
There seemed to be a continuity, but you're not.
Yeah, but there was also like this idea of like, well, was I really aware at the moment when all that stuff was going on, or do I just remember it now because I wasn't? I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that's a difference between awareness and conscious awareness.
Right.
Like you can be aware of stuff without being conscious.
True.
Yeah.
So then there's like times when I've gone to sleep and shortly after I actually fell asleep, which I was not aware of when I fell asleep, but I would start having a dream almost immediately. And I'm just kind of like in the dream, just doing random stuff as though like I just appear in the middle of this movie and I'm just acting out the part like nothing ever changed.
Yeah.
And then I wake up and I realize, oh, that was a dream.
Yeah.
So this idea, I kind of, thought out, this could be like what the afterlife may start out as. Like you're going to sleep, your body's shutting down, you go into the slow. Yeah. So you're kind of in a dream, right? And you're going about doing the stuff in the dream, and just like any normal dream, except somewhere in there your body dies. And you're still in the dream and you're doing stuff. And then, as dreams do, they like rapidly change and all this kind of weird stuff, but you go along with it like it's normal.
Because you're not conscious.
Because you're not really conscious of it. But it occurred to me that it's possible, since, there are ideas about lucid dreaming, and a lot of people have experienced lucid dreaming where somewhere in the dream you become aware.
Are we saying this wrong? Is it that you're conscious but you're not aware? self-aware. You're not, because self-awareness
Right.
is like where you're conscious and you're aware of yourself. Like you're like, okay, I'm here and I could question my actions.
So that's like lucidity, right?
Yes, lucidity. So a lucid dream is where you suddenly become self-aware.
Okay.
In the dream. So that's why I was saying, are we saying this wrong? So like you're conscious, but you're not conscious of yourself. You're not self-aware. So lucidity, yeah. Okay. So yeah.
Good distinction. So the idea is that after a while you might begin to lucid dream. And what is clinically described as lucid dreaming, right? You become self-aware, as you say.
You begin to ask questions.
And so then you're like, okay, I'm in a dream and I'm blah, blah, blah. But then eventually you start, because this idea is based on a theory that the dream world, whatever that is really a world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so eventually you begin to realize, like, you start to remember your life. The more lucid you become, and you start pulling memories from all this, and then you lead up to the point of like, wait a minute, I actually died there.
Yeah, I was just looking. Last thing I remember was looking at my leg over on the dashboard.
So it's just an interesting concept to me. Is like, how long, quote unquote long, I don't know how time works in dream world, but
that would explain ghost phenomena in some ways, because you get this sort of weird repetition thing.
Yeah.
It's like that's the ghost and it's unconscious.
Not really sure what's going on.
It isn't a recording. It's the ghost. It's actually the ghost of the person who is not yet aware that they're dead.
And it could take, in terms
years.
of our time, it could take years. It could take who knows. But in the dream world,
especially if the person was not a lot of self-aware during life, people would kind of just go through the motions all the time. They could end up being ghosts for centuries.
So a person that lucid dreams very often, if that's the way you say it, lucid dreams.
Yes.
They may become aware very quickly, and then so to continue on this idea, if that really is, what happens to your consciousness, you're in this dream world. Eventually, it's like this world has all these rules.
Yeah.
That when we talk about dreams, we're like, this world has no rules, right?
Yeah.
Well, it does. We just don't know them like we know the rules of this world.
We think there's no rules because we are not. Most people this is the way I look at it now. The way dreaming happens is you are not making any choices or any decisions. Stuff is just happening, and you're just doing stuff.
Right.
You notice that? It's
yeah.
Like you're kind of going along for the ride, but it's to the point where you're not even wondering about why am I going along for this. I'm sitting here chewing purple bubble gum, and the next thing I know, I'm on a train car that's upside down, and then I'm underwater. It's like, and it's all good, and there's a party down here. It's great. You just somebody gives you a drink, and you walk upstairs. It's like there's no. If any of that happened in real life, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on? So like, there's zero, and that's what's interesting about that is over time of reading various accounts of different people and experiences they've had. And these are usually in experiences with people with lucid dreaming, is they will begin to encounter another lucid entity.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's fascinating to me is that they'll be in a dream and suddenly they'll realize it's a dream and they'll become lucid, and then they realize that the other lucid person, being or whatever, has been with them for a while, and they're like, finally.
Oh yeah. So that's an interesting idea too. Is it like when you encounter people in your dream, in your daily, nightly dreams or whatever, because it's all discombobulated, or we don't really know how to relate in that world yet. Like we haven't learned.
It's like the world is acting on us instead of us acting on the world. Yeah.
There could be multiple times like other beings trying to approach you.
Right, but they would recognize
like, hey,
that you're in your automata state.
Right.
You would just,
like this guy is sleepwalking.
Right. It's pointless to talk to him.
Don't even try to wake him up. He's not there.
If you go to interact with him, it'll just merge into his non-conscious whatever, and you can't do it. That's why it's always fascinating to me when the person becomes lucid, and then there's this guy standing next to him like, finally, there you are.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa, ho, hey, man. It's like the implications of that. Think of that. Like, if you lucid dreamed into the dream world, dreamed? If you lucid dreamed into the dream world, and like I was there too, but I'm just dreaming normal, and you're like, oh, there's Russ, and you go to talk to me, but I'm just I'm like,
you're NPC.
I'm NPC. I'm like, I used to be an adventurer like you, but then I took an arrow to the knee. And you're like, okay, this is dumb.
Yeah, every time I talk to this guy, he's saying the same thing over and over again. Yeah.
Where's my purple bubble gum? Yeah. So and then if I became lucid,
If you give him a harmonica, he'll tell you something different.
that's right. I used to have a harmonica like this.
Till I took an arrow to the knee.
So I took an arrow to the knee and a harmonica to the mouth. But like, but then and you can imagine if I suddenly became lucid, you would see me go, right? I'd start looking around and you would go, I'd be like, oh, dude, whoa, like you would recognize the person suddenly becoming aware.
Yeah,
right?
just similarly, like you could recognize somebody who's talking in their sleep, like their eyes are open and they're talking. They're not really.
Man, that is some creepy shit, though.
I know, but you at first you're like, oh, someone's talking, so they're awake, and then you go to try to converse with them, and you're like, nope,
Yeah,
they're not.
yeah,
You figured out real quick.
yeah. Especially because they say really creepy stuff.
I know what I'll invent.
What are you gonna invent?
I can't remember what it is.
A people blender.
Ew.
What's the about the cave under the house? That was pretty creepy.
A naval toilet ring heater.
Wait, a navel as in navy or belly
I don't know. The
button?
guy
Or
was asleep.
belly button. Okay. Stupid Navy, always navel gazing.
Yeah, because they got those metal toilets down in the submarines.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
like, ooh, sit down on it.
Yeah. Oh, what did that just...
Can't poop after you sit on that thing.
That just reminded me... That just reminded me there's...
It's a great invention.
Yeah, we'll get into that next.
It's a great invention that the sleeping guy should have actually acted upon.
Yeah, you probably should have. Metal toilets. Wow. Attached to a large ship floating in salt water. Wow. So we've got a couple minutes left in this segment. I wanted to get back to the Egyptians.
Yeah.
Think of that.
Detangentizing
All the way back to tangent 1. Think of that like making this into a science, like making a science or a sort of an investigatory project out of the world directly after you die.
Yeah.
Because they discover at some point that there are certain trials that you go through,
Right.
and that given that you pass these trials in certain ways, certain rewards happen, right? So that
Yeah.
this is why they call it House of Millions of Years, right? If you're able to go through the duat, you go through the opening of the mouth, which we can get into that later. You go through the weighing of the heart, where they take the feather of truth and it's like it's a feather. Fail. Feathers. My heart is going to be heavier than a feather, but
Light as a feather.
yeah, stiff as a board. But and you pass all those things, then you are, they have all these symbols in there, like Osiris and the barks, the boats that they use, and you have Anubis, the dog, who's leading you, and like there's all this stuff that I don't understand, but they're clearly using dream world type symbols, right?
Yeah.
And so I always wonder, like, having this common myth of the afterworld, of the afterlife, in their culture to the point to where everyone knew it. Like the Book of the Dead was so like people knew it. Everybody knew they knew that story. Like all the kids in the West know, like Snow White or the Little Mermaid or something.
Yeah, or the the afterlife, heaven in the Christian religion.
Right, but heaven has zero almost no symbols and no associations.
Hey, you're forgetting about the pearly gates, bye.
Well, there's the pearly gates of St. Peter, and in the other place, and the big book. But that's what I'm saying. Like,
and there's basically the trial of your past your
there's
life's
judgment,
transgressions, and all that
there's
kind
judgment,
of stuff.
Yeah.
But there are things. I'm not trying to.
Yeah,
split hairs with you.
You're
here,
right.
but-
There is stuff like that, but well, I don't know. I've never seen those as being like. So here's the secrets to this game, right? Because that's what the Book of the Duat looks like to me. It's like they're saying. I mean, they give you maps. There's no maps. Here's the pearly gates, right? You got maps in there.
And then you come to the Sphinx, and he's like, "Let me ask you these questions."
Right. Yeah. Ask me the questions. I'm not afraid. That's easy. But like, so if you have this as a science, then like, does this explain kind of like the super advancement of their culture? Like, 'cause think of that. Everyone is living in a certain way being fully aware and like not just believing because it's not about they don't believe this in a religious sense. They know it because they have thousands of their people have explored it. Probably most of them have gone through a near-death experience at least once. It was like a requirement. Like you just like baptism is probably that's what it used to be born again. And the reason people became like it totally changed them is because near-death experience changes you. It's like it's been shown through meta studies of thousands of people who reported near-death experiences, and then the doctors go back 10 years later to see what and they are vastly different people. And so imagine an entire culture like that where everyone in the culture at least once did entheogens to have a mystical experience on in altered states, and then had an induced near-death experience with the afterlife. You would not fear death. You would believe in other worlds to the point where it would be a knowing as opposed to like a belief.
Yeah.
Dude, like...
Very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, you could just kind of... It's hard to imagine.
You can kind of sit around and wish that would happen.
Yeah. This is Graham Hancock says he thinks that anyone who's going to be, one of the powerful leaders of the West, the free world, should be required to take 6 months of ayahuasca drinks before he does it. That would be amazing. Like, we have shaman presidents.
Yeah, instead we've got, oh yeah, I smoked weed, but I didn't inhale.
Right.
Okay. You're dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's one, yeah.
Fail.
You didn't inhale? Fucking waste. Get out of here. That doesn't even matter, right? I mean, if you get it in your mouth, it's game over. All right. That's the end of the segment. Thank you very much for listening. This is episode 5.
Snake Bros.
Snakes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Brothers of the Serpent podcast. This is the second half of the first hour, and we were discussing Egypt. Enough said.
Enough said.
But I did have a question real quick. The drowned god. How do you understand what he says? He's like...
Yeah.
It must be a difficult god to follow. Yeah, so on the subject of Egypt, less on the their beliefs or whatever, but more on the tangible structures they left behind. The pyramids at Giza, which everyone is familiar with to some extent. The little 8-inch by 8-inch tunnels that go from the Queen's Chamber that were explored by the robots, right?
Yeah.
There's
Gantenbrink.
yeah, poor old Gantenbrink. And I would like to get in depth on what he found in those tunnels, because there's a lot of stuff besides the door at the end that really makes it the whole saga fascinating. Scrape marks, weird burned areas that were then later scraped, and we're talking about like an 8-inch by 8-inch square tunnel. It's minuscule, but he's got photos and everything. It's really fascinating. Like there's long scratches on the bottom corners. Like it looks like something that was wide enough to fit across the whole thing was dragged all the way up,
Yeah.
pulled all the way up. So, okay. There was what seemed to me to be a farce of a like a show on, I guess was it the Discovery Channel? I think it was the Discovery Channel's first thing they did, right? So they promoted the hell out of it when they were going to open the door, right? 10 years after it had been found by Gantenbrink. And the way they did that was they sent a 9/11 sort of rescue style robot, those little robots they were using to search the rubble for bodies, because they're real versatile and they have tools and lights and other things on them. So they sent one of those up there, and it bored a hole through the quote unquote door, and then sent a fiber optic camera through the hole. And what the camera appeared to see was a sort of a continuation of the shaft itself, but very rough. It was everything was, the stone cutting was very rough, like it was not finished at all, which is completely uncharacteristic considering the way the shaft had been getting more and more refined as the robot approached the door until the last block the last like 4 meter long block that the shaft was cut in was made out of the Tura limestone, which is the really, I mean, it's almost like marble. It's it is the top quality stuff that they only used when they were finishing out interior spaces where people were going to be. Like, so when you're deep in the body of the pyramid, the limestone blocks would be just the stuff right next door. Like, so basically off the Giza plateau, there's a quarry that's like right there within walking distance of the pyramids. And they quarried a lot of the limestone blocks for the pyramids from that quarry. And it's just, it doesn't suck. It's just not high quality stuff. It's not real fine, So that made up the bulk of the tunnel. But when you started to approach that door, you could see the blocks were getting smoother and lighter in color until the last one is just, I mean, it's polished. Yeah. And if anybody remembers the picture of the door itself too is this bright colored limestone where the bulk of the pyramid's made out of this dark yellow stuff. This was almost eggshell white, So when they drill through and they see the other side is rough, unfinished, it doesn't make any sense. But the point I'm trying to get to is what's fascinating about what they did see in there. If this was a real thing, I'm still up in the air about whether they just staged the whole deal. And this caused some debate. But if you look at the images that the probe took, okay, so you're looking at another 8x8 square space with another quote unquote door, but this one's very rough. Just like really close to it. So you're looking at just sort of like an airlock, I guess. Some kind of airlock. Yeah. So it's an interior space, but what's fascinating is in the lower right corner of the camera images, so you're looking at the lower right corner of the, if you imagine when you look at the picture, you're looking straight in the tunnel. So you got the right wall on the right, the left wall all the way over on the left of the picture, ceiling and floor. And so on the floor over to the right, near the right-hand wall, are a couple of very faint, but definitely there, red marks. Okay? And they're very faint, but you could see that they're
like Mason's marks?
Yes, and these are real Mason's marks. But this is what's fascinating. They are not of any known hieratic script. They're not, presumably they're either, so the vast majority of Mason's marks are either arrows, right? Like here's the upper left corner of the block, right? Or something along those lines. It'll be an arrow, or it'll be a shape that has that's not. It won't be a circle or something like that. Like it'll be a shape that has, this is the front side, this is the back side of that shape, like an arrow or a triangle, you know what I'm saying? Or there'll be numbers. Mason's marks are, the vast majority of them are arrows or numbers. The numbers will be the number of the block, right? This is block number 1,564, right? And they'll do that because the engineer at the building site knows exactly where that block's supposed to go, right? Wow. Because the Masons had cut block 1,564 specifically for the spot it's supposed to go in. Okay? Jeez. So they'll put the number on the block. Okay, so these are not arrows or anything. They look like symbols, like writing. They don't appear to point towards any particular area of the block, right? They instead look like numbers.
Are they fully revealed in the space, or is it partially covered by?
Well, I mean, it's hard to tell. But if you think of the way the shaft is constructed, so imagine like you put down a block, okay, and then you're going to put another block on top of that. Before you do, you turn it over and you cut a square trough out of the middle of this block. So it's 8 inches deep and 8 inches wide. You cut this trough out of the very center, and then you flip that over and put it down. And that makes the shaft. That's how. Okay, so when you're looking at the floor, you're actually looking at the top of the bottom block. So the numbers could continue under, we don't know. We don't know, basically. But the point I'm trying to get at, and this is what fascinated me about those numbers, or whatever they are. One thing you can't, well, you could, but you would be really retarded. You can't really argue that those were put there by anyone. I mean, where that door is, if you go look at a schematic of the pyramid, it is in a place where no one has been since it was being built, unless there's all kinds of tunnels and chambers that we don't know about, which is possible. Okay, but
Yeah.
that robot, when it was looking at these old paint marks on that block, was in a place in the pyramid which probably hasn't been exposed since it was being constructed. I mean, how do you. So again, unless there's all kinds of chambers that we don't know about, but so that's the thing. You could say more than almost anything else with the Great Pyramid anywhere that those markings are builder original. Okay, closer to definite more than any other mark anywhere else, right? So the relieving chambers. So now we're going to the relieving chambers above the what's called the king's chamber. So the king's chamber is an arbitrary name. It's no king was ever buried there, but the king's chamber is the big granite box that is the highest room within the bulk of the pyramid, and it's the one that has the sarcophagus box, quote unquote sarcophagus box in it. So that's why it's called the king's chamber. That's where Khufu's body was going to be interred. But above that chamber are these things that they call relieving chambers. So if you look at a structural drawing, you'll see the king's chamber square, and then there's this weird sort of ladder kind of construction above it, where there's a series of 5 very small or very like low ceilinged chambers in succession, one on top of the other above the king's chamber, and then it's got a very peaked stone roof, and this is all within the body of the pyramid. So they call them relieving chambers because they presume that
they're trying to relieve the structural weight of the rest of the pyramid on top of that square chamber.
Yeah, they're like, all the entire rest of the pyramid, because the king's chamber is in the very middle. It's the very center of the
Yeah, and of course that was determined by people who are not builders.
Right. Yeah, they're like, look, you can see how because there's this weird peaked roof above the relieving chambers, so they're saying that those peaked roof stones are sort of shifting the weight of the pyramid above off of
sides.
To the sides, yeah, and then you've got these, and you have these chambers, all these hollow spaces, and I'm just like, I don't know how they imagine that would work, but that's what they call them, relieving chambers, which they probably weren't. There's a bunch of strange things about those chambers, but the part I want to get at here is that these contain the holy grail in terms of like how conventional Egyptology and archaeology attributes the Great Pyramid to the pharaoh Khufu, or Khephren, okay? And that is because in 4 of these 5 chambers, not the first one, but the 4 above it, there's like just red paint all over everything in there. And there's like, just writing all over the dark granite of the rocks in there, and it's real. Just if you look at, I've seen a few pictures of it, and it's, the symbols are huge, and they go slathering across multiple stones, and anyway, it looks to me like a forgery. But the point is that in amongst all these symbols and stuff, all these hieroglyphs, there is the cartouche, which is a cartouche is basically a big oval that they always draw before they put the symbols for somebody, a king's name or a pharaoh's name or any royal's name. So that's called a cartouche. You see this giant oval, and then inside the oval are 3 or 4 symbols. That oval designates this is the name of the pharaoh, and they always surround it in an oval like that. So they call that oval the cartouche. So the cartouche of Khufu, or Khephren, is found in these quote-unquote mason mark symbols in these relieving, quote-unquote, relieving chambers above the quote-unquote king's chamber in the Great Pyramid, quote-unquote, tomb. Okay? That, and like they always point, like this is the proof, right? Because, and this is really important, nowhere else in the Great Pyramid are there any writings or illustrations of anything. I mean, you find graffiti, it's obvious graffiti, like so in, like at the very top, on the upper exposed layers at the very top, there's just thousands of names and dates in all kinds of languages all over those blocks at the very top. There are some in the subterranean chamber down below. You go down there and I've seen pictures of just like there's people have carved their names, from through the ages. Okay.
Yeah.
But inside the pyramid, there's nothing earlier than 900. I think it's 900 AD when Al-Mahmud cut his tunnel. But previous to that, no one even was sure if it had an inner part.
Right.
It was sealed with the casing stones, and the casing stones were so well made that you could barely see that it was not. You could barely see the seams to tell you that it was not just one giant triangle in the desert. Like you had to look really closely to see the seams between the casing stones, and they were so well placed that even though people tried, because
they tried to get a wedge between them, they couldn't even.
Many ancient structures get used as quarries, right? They couldn't pry. And you think about it, it's because they locked themselves down. All the weight of all the casing stones all the way down to the foundation. So if you're trying to pry a block down at the bottom, the weight of every one of them going all the way up is kind of on that block. You're not going to do it. It took an earthquake to break, to sort of shift some of the blocks enough to where they could start getting wedges in there, and then they just dismantled it. So, so most of those blocks are now in various parts of Cairo. But the point I'm getting at here is that if you read, if you read his Vyse, I think his name is Howard Vyse. I think that's the right name. Anyway, the guy who supposedly discovered these relieving chambers with the mason marks that contain the cartouche of Khufu was kind of a shady character. He's not an archaeologist. He was a British sort of adventureman. He was a kind of in a noble family. They had a lot of money. He had been an officer in Afghanistan for a while or whatever. He was doing a kind of a tour of the Middle East, and he went to Egypt, and he basically, this is crazy, but he basically rented the Great Pyramid for a year. Okay, he basically paid a shitload of money, of his family's money, and he was like, I'm going to make a name for myself by
discovering something amazing.
Flying carpets or whatever he thought he was going to find in the 1800s in the Great Pyramid. So for a year, he had sole access and could do anything. Dude, this guy took gunpowder in there and blew through walls. I mean, Yeah. This is how he found the quote unquote relieving chambers. So somebody had already found one of them above the king's chamber, and that one's called Campbell's chamber. Okay. So, and the way they did it was they blasted their way through around the king's chamber through the limestone, because the granite, you can't really blast the granite. So they tunneled through the limestone to above the chamber, and above the king's chamber, and they found this relieving chamber. There was no
markings in there.
Right, and there's also no entrance or exit to these chambers. Were not meant for. They're kind of like inside wall spaces. You're not supposed to go there. Like if you tear through a wall, you're like, wow, look at this chamber I found. Yeah, great job, guy. You just tore the wall down to find out that there's a space between the walls. It's awesome. That's basically what they did. So he saw that, and he was like, and he did it again, and tunneled around and found another one, and they kept doing it, and they found 5 in total, so he found 4. So in Campbell's chamber, which had previously been discovered, curiously, there's no writing in that one. And the 4 above it that Howard Vyse finds, there's like red paint slopped all over everything. So, most, like a lot of people in the alternative sort of community with Egyptology believe that Vyse basically forged this stuff because
Didn't they also find evidence of that later in because at the time that he had discovered those, they only understood a certain codec or whatever, like of translating the hieroglyphs. So he had, and some of the stuff that they had translated was incorrect.
Well, it was it was more like you're right in the sense that there are strange inaccuracies contained in the quote unquote Mason marks that they discovered that are the similar inaccuracies in what was happening with the translation at the time, and it has more to do with the fact that across the ages, Egyptians wrote sort of differently, right? So in the 4th Old Kingdom, they wrote this symbol like this, but in the 25th New Kingdom, they wrote it like that, and it's totally different looking. So there was some, they hadn't worked out all the kinks on that stuff yet. So people were using wrong script for the wrong periods. Yeah. So some of that stuff is kind of encoded into which looks like, so you're like, okay, so they got the most popular like hieroglyphic translation book of the day, which contains these same errors, and then they use that to sort of write what they wanted in there, and thus encoded the errors in there. But like there's all kinds of sophistry to get around that, like because it becomes a quant self argument almost, right? So, but what's fascinating is that there are other marks in those chambers. Okay, so you see all this crazy hieroglyphs and cartouches and stuff, but there are also these weird little symbols that are kind of just randomly, and Vyse published a book about this. He's like, yes, me, the discoverer that Khufu really did, just like everyone thought, built the pyramid, right? Basically, is what he was doing. He was determined to find proof that Khufu built the pyramid. So he published a book about that. But recently, people have gotten a hold of his private diary, his journals from that period. Okay, so there's hundreds and hundreds of pages of like terrible handwriting, doctor stuff. Just like horrible handwriting that people have been pouring through and looking to see what did he say about this period, because we know what he said in his public book, that like they opened up the next chamber above Campbell's chamber and they're like, oh my, there's this glowing cartouche in there of Khufu or whatever. He's like making it all badass sounding. But in his private writings, that first night after they opened that first chamber, he says very interesting markings in the chamber, but nothing hieratic, nothing that we can recognize, and no, there's no script, is what he said. And that's a very weird thing for him to say. I mean, obviously most people would be like, okay, so he's lying in the public thing. He put those in later, because if you look at his public account, there's nothing about them not really finding any script. Like he says, they opened the chamber and it was just there glowing in front of their eyes, all this writing. So whether or not he forged these is kind of immaterial to why I'm talking about this. What I'm interested in are the symbols that he did definitely find in there.
Yeah, the ones he wrote about in his journal.
Right, that he were like, well, there are some markings, but can't really connect them to any kind of. He assumes they're Mason's marks, but he doesn't really know, because he doesn't recognize any of them. Okay, those marks are still there, and amongst all this sloppy red shit slosh all over the place, there are these very faint. Okay, and again, they do not correspond to any known hieratic script. Okay, now all through Egypt's existence, and I mean, what we could talk about 3,000 or 4,000 years of civilization, right? From the Old Kingdom all the way up to the New Kingdom, up into the Hellenistic, where Greece was kind of running the place after Alexander conquered it. So Ptolemaic, all the way up until the very end when the Ottomans took it over. You have thousands of years of empire, and they used hieroglyphs, hieratic script through from the beginning to end. Okay, and there's a definite progression. You can see it kind of shows up weirdly, like fully formed at the very beginning, but they never used anything else. They came up with shorthand versions and everything. There's all these different versions, but it's always quote unquote hieratic. It's a form of hieroglyphs. These symbols are not hieratic. And what's more fascinating is some of them look a lot like those little symbols seen through the camera on the other side of that door. So I don't know if this is too obtuse for people to see where I'm going with this, but basically what I'm trying to say is like, here are the real symbols from the real builders, and they were not hieroglyphs. Which means the Egyptians didn't build the fucking pyramid. Somebody before they... Okay, because this is my... I don't know how many people think this, but my idea about Egypt is that they found Giza. Right? Maybe they were sort of a kind of an advanced buttflap civilization. They were not, they were not stupid or whatever, but Giza, like with its huge monuments, so the Sphinx, whatever it was at the time, maybe a lion, and then these massive pyramids. Okay, none of the little ones. There's shitloads of stuff all over the Giza plateau now, but just imagine a flat plane, like somebody has gone onto this plateau and has cut it flat. All right, I don't know how many people know this, but the entire Giza plateau has been sawed flat. It's made out of stone. It's made out of limestone. Somebody has cut the limestone, so the parts that stuck up above the place where they wanted the ground to be, they've cut that off, and they've cut perfectly flat. And then there's places where it kind of sinks below, and they filled that with basalt.
Yeah.
Okay, so these huge, massive basaltic slabs that the bottom parts of them fit the contours of the freaking limestone.
Yeah, it's insane.
And the entire plateau is leveled to within the tolerance of a quarter inch from one end to the other. Okay, so
that's what they built the pyramid on.
They put the pyramids on this thing, so they flattened the whole fucking plateau. They're like, look at that mountain, cut it off. And then we're gonna, right? Okay, and then they built the pyramids on that. So imagine this maybe even spiritually advanced, like maybe the early Egyptians had already had the beginnings of their, their afterlife culture going on, and then they discovered this place of the gods. This is where you get the idea of Zep Tepi the first time, the beginning. They see these buildings and they're just like, oh my God, right? Yeah. And what's fascinating is for thousands of years, all of the elites, the pharaohs, whatever, they buried themselves in mastabas. And a mastaba is basically a little model of a pyramid. Okay, so there's all over the Giza plateau, all around all the big pyramids, you see these little mounds of rubble. Those used to be brick-made mastabas. It's a little tiny pyramid, maybe as big as a house, or maybe even just a small shed. Like they're kind of tombs, they're graves. And you would build as big as one as you could afford, being whatever.
10 by 10 by 10 tangent triangles.
That's right, tangent pyramids of death. Because they looked at these huge ones and thought, surely the gods are buried there, right? These are the graves of the gods from the early times. That's what But then somebody discovers the descending passage through the casing stones. Okay, so at some point in Egypt's history, some genius is like he's been bugged by the Great Pyramid his whole life. He's like, fuck it. And he's like, spends all this time and he finds the door, because there was an entrance that had a trick to it, but if you knew where to go and where to press or whatever, it was on the north side down near the bottom, you could rotate a stone and it would kind of spin inwards, and then you would get access to the
freaking awesome.
You would, it's like straight up Indiana Jones style, and you had to hold it, and like when you went down below and let it go, when it would close behind you.
My God, that's freaking awesome.
So that would give you access to the descending passage, which goes like 300 yards or whatever through the body of the pyramid, down into the bedrock itself, and down into the subterranean chamber. Okay. After that, everyone started burying themselves in subterranean chambers. All of a sudden you have the Valley of the Kings, and every freaking person is buried in this like long tunnel that goes down into the rock, and then there's a bunch of rooms down there.
Huh.
So you see what I'm saying? They stopped burying themselves in little mastabas and started burying themselves in these long tunnels with rooms at the bottom in the rock, because somebody found the entrance.
Yeah, so they're copying what they found.
Right, but that's what's amazing about the whole thing. Like, you can see their mastabas getting better and better, and somebody starts to like, wait, if I do it with this angle, it like tells me all this math, right? So they start discovering the math hidden because they're burying themselves in it. So they're learning how to build them, because every time somebody dies, some engineer is building a masaba, and he's like, wait, what? If it's 52 degrees and that, holy fuck, right? He's finding pi, he's finding phi. So their culture becomes more and more advanced to the point to where they're building places like Karnak, which like basically is the temple of the body of man. Yeah. So somebody has seen that all these ratios of numbers exist in every bone in our freaking body, and then they start seeing them in the stars. So they start building these temples, all based on them thinking that the gods were buried in this giant triangle, right? So they're building these triangles to bury themselves in, and thus discovering the math hidden in them. Then eventually somebody finds the descending passage. They don't find the upper chambers, because like the descending passage, you go halfway through, and there's another trick stone in the ceiling that will rotate, and that gives you the ascending passage that gets you to the Queen's chamber and the King's chamber and all that shit. Yeah. So they didn't know about that. It doesn't seem like they knew about it, because you would never see it, So they got in the right way. You walk all the way down the ascending passage, and there's these subterranean chambers, and then everyone starts burying themselves like that after that. And again, there's math and all that stuff too. So I'm just saying, like, imagine, this is a very rough idea, but it's fascinating to me to think that because they see this gigantic structure in the desert that's obviously very ancient already, they think surely the gods made this, right? And they start to emulate it, but they want to be buried like the gods. They start building little pyramids. They discover math because of that, because they're trying to copy this thing that has fucking speed of light encoded in it and everything else. And so they just think about that, discovering it worked is what I'm trying to say. If all these legends of the pyramid, the Sphinx, and everything having the Hall of Records, the Hall of Records is the building, right? The building itself. People are still finding crazy math connections and stuff, stuff that we barely understand in this structure. It's like the Hall of Records is it's there.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, maybe there really
that's it.
Yeah, maybe there really is a chamber below the Sphinx with golden books or whatever. But dude, I mean, they encoded. Just, again, look at the Egyptians. They became a 4,000 year long, amazing, most powerful civilization in the world because they were copying that fucking triangle when they were trying to bury themselves. Like,
Yeah, that's freaking awesome.
yeah, that single that out of place artifact.
And even like after they fell, and it's like, you know, we go into the Dark Ages.
The knowledge carried on.
We go into the Dark Age and all that. Like our civilization is standing on the shoulders of whoever built that building too.
The Renaissance began when the Medici family. He was dying. He was on his. What?
Yeah, you
Oh,
can
am
get
I
up
far
on
away?
The,
Yeah. Mic etiquette. Yeah, he was dying and he had a choice. He had the Byzantine Empire was sort of the noble families were coming apart and they were selling off heirlooms. The Byzantines were the remnants of the Romans, right? And the Romans had taken over Greece, so they kind of had control of Egypt because Greece had taken over Egypt, right? So these Byzantine families had relics from Egypt that they had gotten through this. So the Medici family in Italy, yeah, I think they were in Italy. The patriarch had a choice. He had gotten 5 works that he had purchased from a fallen Byzantine noble family, and it was like works of Plato. There was some stuff from Aristotle, and then he had the Hermetica, right? Being they actually thought this was the book of Hermes Trismegistus, like the god Hermes, the god of knowledge. So he said translate that one first because he basically he knew he was dying. He was only going to be able to hear at least only a piece of one. He said Hermetica. So the guy started working on it, and that translation of that book caused the Renaissance in all of Europe. Okay, the Hermetica being translated. I mean, alchemy. Bam! People start doing chemistry and just like all that shit came from Hermetica, which is old Egyptian stuff. Like, it's still doing it, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
It's freaking awesome.
It's amazing. That's a great play. It's into the segment.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
I didn't have to do anything.
Sometimes you just have to stand there and go, whoa.
Sweet.
Sweet. Trying.
I'm brothers with that snake. All right.
All right. Stay Russ.
I tell well, let it fall on closed eyes and deaf ears, just as long as you can tell.
All right, welcome back to Snake Bros, Brothers of the Serpent. First segment of hour 2, episode 5. 1, 2, 5.
Wait, 2, 3, 4, 5.
No, this is not Fibonacci.
Oh no, we don't have 1.
This is
Dun,
1
dun, dun.
of 2. Anyway, numbers are interesting for nerds. But on the topic of Egypt,
I'll probably be on this topic for the rest of the podcast.
yeah, it's a great topic. We were talking about the way all of these civilizations have pulled from the ancient knowledge that was, built into the pyramids and all this kind of stuff. But there's just this one interesting thing that I wanted to talk about that I found when researching words. So I'm a writer. I write lyrics for songs, and lyrics are kind of like
Archaeolinguistics is what that's called.
What?
Archaeolinguistics, when you're digging into the history of, like, the deep history of words.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've always referred to it as etymology because that's what I look up.
I mean, etymology is probably a more accepted term, but like archaeolinguistics is specifically.
That sounds way cooler.
Right. I mean,
so I'm an archaeolinguist. No, I'm just kidding. I'm an armchair theorist. But
That's pretty cool too.
I like to, when writing lyrics, like I sometimes I don't know what I want to write, and I'll just be humming along with things and some weird sound, or I want this specific sound, right? That may sound good. Yeah. That for some reason attracts me when I'm, mumbling mumbo jumbo and while playing a riff or something on a guitar. But anyway, that has led me to look up spelled out sounds, like on Google or whatever, and it'll give me words. Like when I start to type in a spelled out sound, if I don't know of a word that actually exists that's like that, like, so I kind of explore.
Consult the article.
Yeah. Well, before Google, I would carry around a dictionary with me and just like flip through looking for a word that fit the sound that I was wanting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, this process that I've been going through for many, many years trying to write things has led me to this new obsession, fairly new obsession, in the last few years of etymology. And I've found some really cool things when trying to write lyrics and having no particular idea of a subject, right? I'll just want the specific word or the specific sound, and I'll look up the word. Even if I already know what the word is, I'm like, where did this word come from?
Yeah.
Right? And so I'll look up these words and
Road.
yeah, and I look at the etymology, which tells me the roots of the word and their origins and all this kind of stuff, and so I've learned, a lot of interesting things from that. And I ended up looking from there into just letters themselves, like the letters that make up words.
Yeah.
All are symbols.
Right.
That each mean something or mean a multiple.
Wait, are we going to go into gematria or?
I don't know what that is.
Where they're all also numbers.
No, that's
okay. All right.
I haven't gone into that yet.
Kabbalah. You start.
Yeah, the Kabbalah.
Get out your math books. We're going to do some spelling.
No, I haven't. I mean, I've known about that with the Kabbalah and stuff, but I don't know how it works.
Okay.
This is just when I started looking into the different meanings of letters and where they come from. I discovered I went through every letter of our alphabet, going through all of them, trying to just
Which
see.
is a very old set of symbols too. Yeah.
Right, and most of them come from the Phoenician alphabet.
Right, and nobody really knows who they were.
Right, but they don't have all of the letters that we have in ours today. But anyway, when I got to X, just turn your phone ringer off, man. What kind of podcast etiquette
have a phone.
is it? No phone.
It's a stash phone. It's not.
Who was phone?
Who was phone?
I say to you, turn your phone ringer off, but then you say, I have no phone. Well, who was phone? Who was phone? Anyway, it's a short horror story there for you. So I come to the letter X, and I start, I start looking into that. And this letter is, the beginning of some strange words like xylophone and xenon.
Yeah.
But xenon is actually...
Noble gas?
Yes, it is. But xenon is the name of the letter X. Was the name of the letter X. Xenon or whatever. And so they named the gas xenon because of the
X.
It's X. So this letter, as far back as it goes, means stranger, visitor, or basically the idea of like unknown visitor, something from somewhere else. Alien.
Not saying it's aliens.
Alien. It means
it's
alien.
aliens. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So xenon gas was an alien gas. It doesn't mix with anything else. It's very strange.
Is the other, yeah.
So
segregation.
I thought that was really cool. But looking into this letter and its roots far, far back, I discovered that its roots go all the way back to ancient Egypt, right? And they had this quote unquote letter. They had something that represented X that was basically stranger, visitor, alien. And these other civilizations that came or that were developing alongside Egypt learned writing and, the written word and all that. They learned it from Egypt. And a lot of them, there were merchant civilizations that, they carried goods and stuff. And they did
all these marks all over.
They did trading and stuff. And they learned all this crazy knowledge from the Egyptians, right?
Yeah.
And they started making their own adaptations to the Egyptian alphabet, if you will. And basically figured out, okay, you can actually write things down by using symbol. Wow.
Yeah.
So they started doing this.
Mark my goods, put prices on
over
there.
and over again, these various different civilizations would, even like this one would say, get the idea of an alphabet from Egypt, and they would create their own. And then later another civilization that experienced those guys would be like, wow, that's genius. So they would get an alphabet of their own adapted from those guys.
Yeah.
Well, time and time again, they would not initially use X. They would not make that part of their alphabet.
Yeah. What is that symbol?
And they would have this alphabet for so many hundreds of years or whatever. And then out of nowhere, suddenly they're like, we need X.
Yeah.
Boom. Alien, stranger, visitor. So yeah, I of course made up this whole scenario in my mind where they're like, they have no experience of this idea of alien, stranger, visitor in the context that the Egyptians had it.
Right.
And so they didn't need it. And that at some point they have that experience.
They did get the experience,
and they did need, and I was like, well, we have nothing to describe this. Oh, well, the Egyptians thousands of years before had something to describe it. Bam, they adopt it. Same thing happened with us.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was really cool.
Those are paleo contact clues, like just that kind of stuff scattered throughout ancient history, where you see these little things and you're like, it looks like we were visited, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's little things like that all through. I love that. Like digging them up out of letters is great. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's obvious ones in like rock paintings and everything like that, but when you have a letter or a symbol or whatever that means that alien visitor or whatever, something else, something not us,
Right.
and not just like we're yellow people and these are purple people, but like more like this is not even human.
Right.
That other cultures are adopting the library,
concept of that.
all the entire lexicon of stuff from this civilization, and then saying like, well, what's that? We don't need that.
Yeah.
But then a couple hundred years later, they suddenly are like, we need that.
And they did this with other things too, not just the letter X, but they did this with, so you can see that like as they gain the need for certain concepts, they'll adopt more of the Egyptian,
right,
or whoever adopted from there. They adopted, but it was just interesting in diving into this X phenomenon.
Yeah,
that all these cultures over time did the exact same thing. Like they didn't need it at first when they began to write about things, and then eventually they were like, we actually need that now.
Yeah, and we use it the same way with the X files, the X ray.
Yeah.
Yeah. X marks the spot.
Yeah, so it's taking that one little story and applying that to our entire alphabet. Like we have this mysterious, ancient, symbolic set of symbols that goes back farther than known history. Like we don't even know where the Egyptians, how they suddenly bam just had all their
disappears
all their
into
writing.
the mists of prehistory. Still intact.
I love that. And then when you take all of these symbols and you look as far back as you can trace each individual one, and you get like this, the more I would read it, like because each one represents a lot of things. It's not just one thing. It's nothing in black and white.
Right. I mean,
there's gray area. It might be black or white. But there's all this gray area, and there's multiple concepts attached to each thing, and then you start to like
they come up in layers too. It's like
as you learn those, and then you look at certain words, modern words, and you see like the combination of these combinations of meanings to each symbol. It's really
right. You get a depth of understanding of the meaning of some words where you're like, whoa,
yes,
that letter and this letter
and this is a wonderful thing to discover as a writer.
Yeah.
Because you can embed so many more deeper layers of meaning into combinations of words and then even like I'll go into like old phrases. I'll find some old phrase that was said, some
Yeah.
colloquialism from hundreds and hundreds of years ago or whatever, that has some cool, all these different little connotations and ideas that are not that, like they can be applied to modern day things, but it's almost like they're on the out, they're lost or forgotten.
Yeah.
But their meanings are recorded.
But just because, and this is the thing, like that interests me on this is like, just because it's been lost or forgotten doesn't mean it isn't there. So it's like,
right.
It's like you're playing with you're playing with a power cable, and if your civilization's been blasted back to buttflap stage and you don't know this is a power cable, it doesn't, just because you don't know it's a power cable doesn't mean it won't shock the fuck out of you if you do something wrong, right? So the power is still there, is what I'm saying. So the pen is mightier than the sword is like a true thing. Like there is ancient knowledge and wisdom hidden in every letter.
Yes.
Of every word. And so when people say things like, sticks and stones may break my bones. Yeah, but words will fuck you up for life. Like, I mean, like it's the shit is powerful. It's serious. Like, the written word and the spoken. I mean, like you can't deny the power of the spoken word in propaganda.
Right.
Just think of all the great orators of history that have just, they get up there and talk and people follow them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the word is powerful.
And then you combine that like with music, which is another ancient art form and mathematical.
Yeah. So we're going to take all these tools and make pulsing sounds that will put everybody into a trance, and then we're going to say these specific words arranged in a specific way.
Yeah, this is a powerful tool.
It's just music, guys. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, you can see what, just on the surface, like what music, the power that music has.
Yeah.
And so I think like,
the rhythmic, anything that used to have like rhythmic drumming in it. So anything that had a pulsing, repeating, boof, boof, anything like that, just repetitive rhythmic drumming, or whatever, was considered witchcraft.
Yeah, well, you just said like the pen is mightier than the sword because with pen you can spells.
That's right. Y'all, I'm real sorry. That's what I thought you were gonna say. Because with pen you can spells.
That's right.
That's right. And you have to have your book of spells.
Yeah. So one of the things I've been thinking about recently too is starting to try to analyze music that I'd come up with, like some riffs that I come up with mathematically, which I don't even know if I'm capable of doing this, but like all the frequencies in the scale have been defined using math, right? They're picked out. They're
what was it? What was the take a string, pluck it, ding, fold it in half, pluck it again, ding,
Yeah. Yeah, so
the
like
circle of the fifths, yeah.
Like that when someone plays something on the piano or plays something on a guitar, any instrument, and they play a melody or they play chords, there's a mathematical representation of what they're doing, and it's already like symmetrical in some way, right? It's because of the scale that we're using. So it's possible that without even knowing it, people that compose music are defining like, mathematical principles and stuff with.
I mean, you're generating three-dimensional like waveforms that are interacting in certain ways.
Right.
I mean, it's
over time to a metronome, whatever. And anyway, all of this stuff that like the whole process of writing music, composing music, and putting lyrics to it with a melody is like, to me, it's like
straight up magic.
Well, it's like borrowing from ancient knowledge.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Using all the symbols and all these mathematical things we've discovered and that we've gotten from these ancient civilizations long past that are totally mysterious to us, and we're trying to discover them. It's great.
I mean, yeah, and that you could definitely tell that along with astronomy, ancient cultures were, at least ones that did a lot of building, were obsessed with resonance. Like they were, not obsessed, but they were focused on it. It was important. Like, I mean, when you find ancient temples, rock cut temples or whatever, where each room is tuned, you know, I mean, it's cut out of solid rock. And when you go in there and you're like, whoa, and the whole room just goes and reverberates with that. And the rest of the temple starts making noise because you did that. That is, somebody was messing with some ancient tech.
So like you were describing the pyramid being like this, basically a book of all of this ancient knowledge. That knowledge is also passed down to us in these other things that we use on a daily basis and don't even realize it, is kind of what I'm getting at. Like their book, they wrote in many forms.
Right. All of our units of measure are full of ancient wisdom and mystery and stuff. Like, you know, where do we get the inch, the foot, the mile, the meter, all this stuff. I mean, even the meter, like a lot of people don't, I mean, especially, modern scientists, they think the meter is very recent, but it's not. I mean, like, there's plenty of evidence that ancient people were aware of the meter because it is a division of the earth in some way. Like like all these measurement systems have to do with the planet or with us. Tell some of your stuff about Fahrenheit. That was all that stuff you were finding out. It was badass. Like, so even our degree, temperature.
Yeah. So, we talk about precession a lot and the numbers associated with precession and geometry in general.
Circles in precession. Yeah.
Right. One of them is 72, which is in the precessional cycle. There's basically 72 Earth years in 1 degree of rotation in the precessional cycle.
Right. Another way to say it is like, if you think of the entire precessional cycle as a year, the great year, 72 of our regular years is 1 precessional day.
Right. Of a 360 day year.
Yeah.
So, that number, we see it pop up all over the place. We're like, look at that,
Yeah, 72.
So I was looking at Fahrenheit, the whole system that this guy developed, and I'm like, man, this dude, he must have known some shit, because 72 degrees is like the optimal temperature for humans to live in. Like, it's perfect.
Perfect room temperature, yeah.
And
not too cold, not too hot.
Right. And another interesting connection is with water. The freezing temperature of water is 32 degrees. And
which makes the melting temperature
the melting temperature 33 degrees. That's right. 33 is another one of these numbers. The boiling temperature of water is 212. So the difference between the freezing temperature 32 degrees and the boiling temperature 212 is 180 degrees. So it's like
all the way around, 180 degrees around backwards. You got boiling.
Right. So it seems like he was using that as the basis for his system, like 180 degrees between these phase changes of water. But then these other weird numbers pop up in that, like the optimal environment temperature for mankind is 72, which is okay. So another weird one is the average human body temperature is like 98.6 degrees.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if you subtract, the difference between 32 degrees frozen water and the average human body temperature, 98.6, is 66.6 degrees. 666 is the number of man.
That's right.
The number of the beast.
Yep. And
so I was just like, what?
Yeah, and the Earth is going around the sun at 66,600 miles an hour.
Right.
Anyway,
I was just like, okay, this dude Fahrenheit, he knew some shit, man. Like, he must have studied the pyramids.
So how did you come up with this temperature measurement?
Well, I studied giant triangles.
Well, I start with this circle.
I said I wasn't into the numerology with letters, but
right.
And precessional numbers, I'm always looking for those, paying attention to those.
Yeah, with precession, like I've been thinking about this. How is an easy way to explain it without trying to build mind diagrams? And like imagine that you went out at the same time every year to look at the night sky, right? And you looked up at your favorite constellation. Every year you're looking at this on the same day at the same hour. You're looking up there in the sky and you're seeing this constellation. Now you would expect that that it wouldn't move, right? Over the course of your life,
say there's a mountain in the background too.
Yeah, so there's a mountain back there, and you're looking at your favorite constellation. You know that the very bottommost star of your favorite constellation, when you're standing in this particular spot on the same night at the same hour every year, the bottommost star is looks like it's sitting on the tip of that mountain back there, and you would expect that to be the same throughout your entire life. Because yes, the Earth and the solar system are moving through the galaxy, so the background stars will shift. But I mean, it takes so long for that to happen. They're so far away that for the solar system to move enough to where sort of the kind of the arrangement of the background stars to start changing we're talking millions of years. So you would expect over the course of your life that star will always be looking like it's sitting right on the top of that mountain. But when you're an old man and you're like 72 years old, you'll notice that it's 1 degree off of the top of that mountain.
Right.
It'll have gone counterclockwise 1 degree off, and you're like,
well, it depends on which hemisphere you're in.
Yeah. Right, because you're standing upside down. Yeah. Meanwhile, in Australia,
No, you're not standing upside down. This is right side up.
Shut up down there on the bottom of the world. And that's what precession is. Because of precession, basically the night sky will shift around around you. Like, so if you imagine you're standing on Earth, the night sky will shift around you once every 26,000 years or so.
Yeah.
So just like it does over the course of a day, the Earth rotates and it makes the whole night sky shift all the way around you, or the course of a year, because the Earth goes around the sun, the whole night sky shifts around you. Every 26,000 years, it does another shift, but this one's backwards compared to
the day or the year cycle.
Right. That's why it's called precess. The motion moves backwards. It's a precession, and they call it the precession of the equinoxes because in my description, you have some arbitrary time that you always look at your favorite constellation, but the way ancient cultures have always done it is on the night of the vernal or autumnal, that's the spring, right?
Yeah, the spring equinox,
the
vernal
equinox. So they go out on that particular morning, and they do it in the morning because they were looking for where the sun comes up. So the sun rises in the east, so you look due east on the morning of the vernal equinox, and you look at what constellation is on the horizon there. So the sun will rise into that constellation, and that constellation will be the age. So we're in the age of Pisces, moving into the age of Aquarius, because the precession has pushed the sun out of Pisces, and now it's moving into Aquarius.
Right, and apparently we moved. If you divide the precessional year, the Great Year, which is really close to 25,920 years long. If you divide that into 12,
yeah,
right, different quote unquote months of the Great Year, great months.
Right.
Each great month is 2,160 years long.
Right.
So in 2012, if you perfectly divide now, the constellations of the zodiac are different sizes. So
right, but they have this sort of like the perfect pie shape is going to be 2,160 years each.
Right. So so in 2012 we supposedly moved into the age of Aquarius.
Right.
Well, what happened roughly 2,000 years ago? The big event. It's like Christ was born.
That's right.
So
moving into Pisces,
they were moving into Pisces,
right?
Which is the fish. The sign of the fish
is the Christian symbol. That's right.
It's very, very interesting. So this tradition has been passed on for longer than recorded history.
That's right. It comes out of the depths of prehistory, just like a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. And again, this is disputed by conventional science. They don't believe that that there was any kind of concept of the zodiacal constellations until Greece, basically. Like, they don't think that Egypt had them and anything before that. But that's obviously, to me, it seems obvious it's not true. There's actually a temple. I can't remember what it's called right now, but there's a temple with a definite zodiacal diagram carved into the stone there, and it's a big circle, and you see all that they've got all the constellations. Sometimes they're different. It's interesting too. Like, some ancient cultures will have like instead of instead of the twins, they'll have something else. Like
Yeah.
Gemini will be something else, but you can see that they're basically the zodiacal symbols. Sometimes they use different animals, And when you see one where they're using like mastodons and like tyrannosauruses, that's an old one.
Tyrannosauruses.
Yeah, because Tyrannosaurus and a freaking taxodon and a giant sloth. That's a really old one. And it's also fascinating to me, like Orion. Okay, Orion figures big in lots of very ancient star myths, but Orion's not zodiacal. He's above the ring of zodiac stars.
Yeah, weren't you telling me that Orion, I guess the star, Sirius, is in Orion, right?
I can't remember. I think it's one of the belt stars, but I'm not sure.
Damn it! I'm gonna have to look that up now.
Yeah,
But you were telling me that
show observer?
Sirius doesn't precess, or
Right.
what?
Yeah,
like
so-
it doesn't engage in.
Right. So the idea of what causes precession, there's multiple ideas. The most popular one right now is that the Earth's axis, the axis itself wobbles. So like the Earth spins around its axis, but precession could be caused by the axis itself also having a rotation, right? So if you imagine a top, you spin the top and it's spinning perfectly, and then if you kind of tap it or you flick it or whatever, the axis of the top will then start to sort of rotate as well. So if the Earth's axis is doing that, that would cause precessional apparent motion, if you were standing on the planet. But another thing that could be causing it is that our sun is in orbit around a common center with another star.
Okay, I'm wrong. Sirius is not in Orion, but
It's the dog star, right?
yeah, it says you can follow Orion's belt
To find it.
to find Sirius. Yeah, it's very close to being in line with Orion's belt.
That's
but
because
it's
Sirius
pretty
is
far away.
Sirius is the dog star. He's Anubis. He leads.
Follow the belt of Orion to find Sirius. Seriously, also known as the dog star or Sirius A, is the brightest star in Earth's night sky.
Right. Because
The name means glowing in Greek,
it's
which
fucking
tells
Sirius.
us nothing.
Yeah, glowing in Greek.
Look up glowing etymology.
Yeah. So, and this took up this is still kind of being looked at, but it doesn't look like the planets precess. So, and it's hard to tell because the planets obviously are.
And the sun definitely does not.
But it should. See, if it was an axial wobble, the sun should precess because the motion is all in the axis.
But if you're only looking at it on the equinox, then
It should
you're
change.
you're making up for it on the equinox, because the equinox is always when the plane of the Earth's equator passes through the center of the sun.
Right.
So as you advance, or
right, so you're right. So the
precession.
equinox should actually move through.
right,
So it
the
doesn't.
equinox should actually like change.
Periods.
Periods
And
by-
it doesn't. That means the
But
sun.
that would be ridiculously hard to measure as well,
Well,
because you would have to know like where the equinox would have been.
right.
Was the equinox
Well,
1 degree off 72 years ago?
I
How
think
can you know? But other than comparing it to
I
the
think
sun.
if you're at the point where your astronomy is advanced to the point where you're trying to find out if there really is this 26,000 year cycle, you probably have got accurate enough measurements to say to understand that there is a shifting of the equinox across the seasons. You know what I mean?
I don't know.
It would take multiple generations because like your great grandson would be like, okay, the equinox is now happening in the dead of winter.
But it wouldn't be, because it's still the equinox is when at this specific position of the Earth related to
not
the
the
sun.
dead of winter, but the months that would normally be associated with the dead of winter. Like, so the seasons would shift across the year. Yeah.
Which probably is happening. I mean, like you're advancing, or I don't. It's not. It's the opposite of advancing.
it's retreating.
Whatever.
It's precessing, damn it. That's why they use that word.
Whatever. We don't fully
It's
understand
not process, it's
Not
precess.
claiming to fully understand it. We're still trying to figure it out.
Well, this is the thing. This is what the debates, that's why we're talking about. The debate over what causes precession.
Right.
So it could be an axial wobble, which should imply that everything in the sky, both sun and planets and everything, should precess.
Right. But even still, if you're measuring it based on every equinox during the axial wobble, the equinox would change.
Right.
Because it wouldn't be exactly 1 year or 72 years of rotation around the sun.
Right.
The equinox would have shifted
Yes.
if the axis is wobbling. So it's
Right. So if you've got a good calendar and you're keeping track of everything, you should be able to tell that the seasons are shifting across the calendar, right? That
yeah,
they're
it would have
moving.
to be.
Yeah, it would take a long time.
Truly.
Yeah. So, but they had thousands of years. I mean,
I'm just saying the accuracy in the beginning of your measurements have to be ridiculous.
yeah. Well, what would happen is people would start to say, "Well, I mean, come on." Like
It's easy to say that 2 years later, the star that was normally on the mountaintop is now shifted
a degree over. Yeah.
That's relative to your position, but if you're looking at it on the equinox, that would be relative to the position of the sun, right? And so,
Yes. Okay. But okay. So then look at it this way: if you figured out to a pretty high degree of accuracy how long a year is,
right,
then the equinox should
Yes.
come on the same day every year.
Right.
And if it starts to move off that day,
then you would not be sure if your year was very accurate.
well, you would start to question that. Yeah, you would be like, well, maybe it's 365.27.
Yeah.
Right, or whatever. But
That's the difficulty in it
But-
because
but-
we're always comparing ourselves to what is in the heavens, the
yeah,
stars.
we
in the
have
heavens,
we have an
the planets and the
unavoidably
sun.
geocentric point of view,
It's difficult to think outside this damn box.
especially when it's flat.
Come on, Shaq. Can't you see the curvature from up there? Freaking flat earthers.
Yeah. He's convinced because like
No, precession is not an axial wobble. It's a reverse spinning of the disk spinning of the...
right.
Damn it.
Proves the Earth is flat because the disc is spinning backwards, like a record on a turtle.
All right, well, that concludes the
Wait. Oh,
first segment of the second hour.
Yep.
Russ is not ready to conclude.
Because the other possibility of beside an axial wobble is that our sun is rotating around some common center with another star. That would say that the precessional movement, or the apparent precessional movement, is caused by that rather
Yeah,
than
the
axis.
whole solar system actually
Right.
moving
So
around.
this is why I was saying like
So would the whole solar system be moving around this other star in reverse to the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so everything in our solar system, if you're looking north downwards, is going counterclockwise, both spin and rotation. Well, there's a couple.
Except for like a few...
there's a couple that are retrograde.
One guy's like a rolling ball and...
Yeah.
Anyway, forget that.
Triton is the moon of Neptune.
But all
Totally
the orbits,
going wrong.
the orbits are going...
Well, Triton is going backwards.
Its entire
It's
orbit is...
orbiting around Neptune the wrong way. Yeah, which is tearing it
Oh,
apart.
okay, that's a moon though.
Yeah, it's a moon, and then Venus.
Of course, it's a moon.
Of course, it's
The
a moon.
planet named Triton.
And then Venus is rotating retrograde.
Right.
It's not orbiting the sun retrograde, but another way to say that is its axis is completely flipped over.
Right.
Which I think is what happened. Like
No, the entire solar system flipped over, Russ.
the whole solar system flipped over. Venus is still upright.
That's right.
That's why it's tearing it apart.
But anyway, the idea is that the whole solar system could also be orbiting
and it would be,
another star.
and it would be orbiting that star clockwise.
Right. In
And that would
comparison
cause
to...
a precessional apparent motion of the background stars.
Right.
Just trust me.
Yeah, just trust me on that.
Kyle and I were like going over there, like we were like, wait, how would this actually work?
Yeah.
So you have to imagine.
He kept trying to tell me that this was a possible...
I'm telling you, it's
another
possible.
I'm just like...
you just have to imagine that you're on a whirling spinning ball amidst a bunch of other whirling
Can't-
spinning balls, and you're going around this bigger ball that's also whirling and spinning around this other one, and then look at the background stars from that position. It's totally obvious, bro. It's totally obvious. So Sirius does not appear, and this may not be the case. I mean, it doesn't appear to precess with the. Now, some people have posited that that's because it's so close, like it's very close. But Alpha Proxima is closer, and it precesses. So I think that if we are in orbit, or we are in some our sun is in some greater system, maybe a cluster. There could be several stars in a kind of a cluster with each other, orbiting a common center or whatever, but Sirius appears to be in that same system because it doesn't appear to precess, which would imply that it's in the precessional system with us.
Right.
So, now
we could be a binary system.
right, or a trinary, or a quadruped or an area. I don't know the five body problem. Like try to figure out how 5 stars of the equal mass will orbit a common center and never run into each other. called the five
Atoms.
body. They do it with magnets. I don't know.
All right, now that
End of segment.
concludes the first segment of the second hour. And
Smokes, let's go.
Snake Bros. Me and Brenner.
Was it Brenner?
Yeah, we went into a cave with a snake.
Yeah, okay, that was Brenner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We went down into this cave. We were hanging out in this kind of one sort of big room.
Yeah, it's like a bubble, weird bubble underground.
Yeah, this little hole in the top of a hill, and we went in there. I was like, "Yeah, check this out. It's badass." We're all looking at all the little cubby holes and all the little alcoves and
the snake skin, right?
yeah. And I'm looking way under this part, and the floor keeps going straight away, but the ceiling had come way down low, and I see this weird white thing back in there. I reach in there with a little stick and pull it up. Snake skin.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it looks like a rat snake or maybe an indigo or something. It's not a rattlesnake. And then I turn around and look with my flashlight into some other little alcove, and there's this huge freaking rattlesnake coiled up, staring right at us both like. But
But he wasn't rattling, so he wasn't.
No, he was not.
He was chill.
Yeah, he was chilling. But we
Probably a she.
we freaking noped the fuck out of that hole.
You were not chill. She was chill.
It was
like-
huge.
she was like, "Hey guys."
That had to be the biggest rattler I've ever encountered.
Yeah.
In person.
Yeah.
In snake.
I think snakes are amazing.
I love snakes.
Yeah.
But-
I don't do the whole kill them on site.
Well, hey, I had no desire to kill this rattlesnake. I
Yeah.
had a desire to GTFO
Right.
and STQ.
I mean, like, fighting a snake is dumb. Fighting a snake in a cave is really dumb.
I've killed some rattlesnakes before, but that was
Right.
because
the only time I would consider killing like seriously poisonous snakes is if there's children. something
yeah,
like that.
I killed rattlesnakes that were in places where people were going to be.
Yeah, which sucks.
And
It
that
still
sucks for the snake.
Yeah,
But I made the best of it, you know?
yeah.
I made a pretty cool, like, bandana rattlesnake skin.
I'll never forget you, rattlesnake. I'll wrap you around my brain.
And then Jimmy Perkins freaking stole it.
Man, fuck Perkins. All right.
No, Perkins is cool. But he stole I don't even know if he really stole it. I'm accusing Jimmy Perkins of stealing my rattlesnake bandana.
Yeah, so fuck Perkins.
Yeah. Someone should write something obscene on his back windshield.
Oh man. Okay, so we were kind of sticking with Egypt. Did we stick with Egypt in the last segment?
Yeah.
Precession?
I went off on a little tangent about, X, and then we went on to the...
X is just two tangents.
That's true.
Perpendicular to...
They're not exactly perpendicular.
Well, it's pretty close.
Anyway, that's a cross.
Yeah.
But we talked about precession a little bit, and,
Right.
and the various ideas that we're trying to wrap our brains around while being wrapped around this thing, being wrapped around this other things, spinning and all that.
Yeah. Everything in space is spinning and rolling and
Yeah.
rotating and orbiting, and it's
Yeah.
hard to like picture yourself on one of those little spinny, rotating, rolling things.
But anytime you think your mind is racing or your mind is spinning, that's true.
You're right.
It's always happening.
That's right. You are describing a really complicated spiral through space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't need to raise your vibrations. You have to raise your rotations.
Raise your rotations, man. Don't touch my crystal. It's piezoelectric.
Yeah. I was trying to raise my rotations.
This curtain down.
What?
Oh, we forgot to put the curtain down. We got to draw the curtain before we snake.
Yeah. What, draw the curtain. Why is it drawn?
With the rope, you draw it to you.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of draw, like drawing.
Oh. I don't know.
Etymology. here.
Etymology of draw.
Etymology in practice. Why are we drawing stuff with better?
Hey, that goes in with like spelling.
Yeah.
Well, to like, some of the earliest known spells were a conjuring. They
Yeah.
were drawing
Yep.
something to you.
And you draw cards as well.
And you have to, you draw cards, but you had to draw like a symbol on the ground.
Right, you have to draw the protective circle, yeah.
It is drawn, and it shall be drawn.
It shall be drawn. Yeah, so to draw is to pull something to you or to sketch it, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I guess. I'm going to look that up right now.
So,
No. I disagree.
I'm trying to remember what my other Egypt topics were.
You only had one?
Yeah, well, I have many.
I just...
They are innumerable, but I can't remember any of them right now. Because I was just reading Manuscript 512. Damn it. I shouldn't have done that. But we can talk about that. Okay. Because it's really cool. In Brazil, in their National Archives library or whatever, they have a bunch of old, state documents, stuff from the government or whatever. And so Brazil has a ton of land that is completely unexplored. It's mostly Amazon, It's just, they have a coastline that's like populated, and then they have jungle. So it's like, if you're more than like 200 or 300 yards from the beach, you're in serious danger of being lost and forever. That's Brazil. That's probably not totally accurate, but it's if you look at it on Google Earth, there's a thin white line with cities and then green.
Yeah.
Just going for hundreds of miles inwards towards the Andes. So they have sent over the years, they have sent many expeditions into the jungle. I mean, like seriously outfitted and organized. Like we're talking about hundreds of people with pack animals and gear, and they would be expected to be gone for years with no contact. So you're in the 1800s, 1900s. You send somebody off in the jungle, you just hope they come back within 5 or 6 years, and if they don't show up within a decade, you're kind of like starting to get worried.
They're going out there being prepared to glad.
That's right.
Get lost.
That was the point.
Die.
Yeah. So one of these expeditions was gone for over a decade. It took off, and and it had I can't remember the numbers exactly, but they had hundreds of men, and they went off, and just 10 years goes by, and like everybody thought that they just that they died out there, which happened to plenty of expeditions, but a tiny, like a small core of, I think maybe 15, like there's very few of them left that come out of the jungle like over 10 years later, and they're like, we made it back, right?
Oh my God.
But they had done what they were asked, which was to, like, they went down south along the coast and then sort of angled inwards and just went as deep as they could go, and they're avoiding various hostile native tribes, and then they would find some that weren't hostile that would tell them all this fascinating shit, and then they would go, they would like, oh, you're crazy white people looking for weird stuff in the jungle, go that way, and they would go that way. So Manuscript 512, which is in the archives in Brazil, is a handwritten report, and it's huge. It's a handwritten report by the leader of the expedition after they got back, basically giving a synopsis of the interesting shit that they found. And he writes this manuscript, and then presumably he grows old, dies or whatever. The manuscript is stored in the archives and forgotten. It's lost. It gets forgotten. Like, people just completely forget that it exists. So
the manuscript glad.
Right. First they glad, then they come back and write about glad, and then the manuscript glad. This is double reverse glad. So it was rediscovered eventually, but by this time, when they found it again, it had kind of been rolled up. Like all these papers, all the old papers or whatever, they had been rolled up, and then like worms got to it. So so every page has this big chunk taken out of it. Right? So
Die worms.
Yeah, fucking paper worms. So when you're reading it, it's like inevitably the I mean, the whole thing is fascinating. But
It's like, and then we got to this, and it was so amazing. There was
Yeah.
this huge wormhole.
That's right. And then it's like missing. And so then we left.
And that was amazing. And then,
Yeah.
so we went to the
The
next
most
thing.
amazing experience of our entire lives. Never seen anything like it. Yeah. It's just like that. You're reading through, and then there's 30 or 40 words missing. And it's always, I mean, well, really, I tried to do this before. I would read through it and say, okay, is it really happening in the most interesting spots? Like this worm.
Of course it is.
This worm was sent by the fucking longheads to eat out the good shit? Or is it just that all of it's good shit? And so I tried to imagine, if it was missing this section on every page, would it still be frustrating? And yes, it would be. And I don't think the worm was being specific, like eating out all the best pyramids or whatever. But in Manuscript, yeah,
Eating all the best pyramids. Oh, look, he wrote about a pyramid here.
that's right. Oh, look, here's a glowing, floating building. Yeah. So it's very interesting. Like they're talking about being. They're near some mountains, okay, and they call the mountains crystal. They say that like as the sun, I can't remember if it's going down or coming up, but whatever. As it's on the horizon, the mountains just light up like they're covered in crystals. Wow. And they're fascinated by this, you know, and they're like, we got to go up there. So they're like, okay, we need to climb up there and see what is making all these colors, these flashing colors. And it's weird because the way he describes it, he's like, so then we tried that and it didn't work for like, and you realize he skips over it, but you realize that they spent months trying to find a way up and couldn't. But he's like, yeah, so we tried and it didn't work. And we were real sad. But then somebody did find a way, so we went up there, right? You're like, okay, wait, months just went by. But they do find he says they found a passage from the foot of the mountains that led up into the peak areas. And he says he describes it as being, he's like, it was very strange. The stone, it was all this loose stone everywhere, but they were all very regular and square, and he's like he supposed it was an old road. Okay, so this path that they found was a hidden sort of pass up into the mountain, but it was made. He was suggesting that it was built.
Yeah,
but it was incredibly ancient. It was no longer recognizable as a road, except for the fact that there were these flagstones cracked and scattered everywhere. So he talks about how they marvel at that or whatever, and they're passing and they can see up on the cliffs and everything all this crystal, like this huge crystalline growth coming out of these mountains. But he says when they get up to a sort of a plateau area where it flattens out, the landscape sort of opens up and there's
this huge
goddamn fuck. Yeah, it's just like that. But they come to what he describes as a river. Okay, so I'm trying to imagine. I'm like, okay, so they're up on a plateau, up in the mountains. But he describes this really powerful, raging river. You know, something that you can't cross on foot. It's between rock cliffs, and so presumably it's hauling ass or whatever. So they find a bridge. And he says that the bridge they cross this constructed, and they're debating whether it was made or not, or was natural. He said it was very form fitting or whatever, but he said it looked like ruins of something. So they crossed this bridge, and then the landscape sort of kind of stair steps down from there, like in these big,
terraces.
Terraces or whatever, but they're the natural terraces of stone. But he says that down below there was a city. I mean, he was like, it's unmistakable. There were, he called them, it was weird words because we're talking about the guy, I think he wrote it in Portuguese, and then, it's either Spanish or Portuguese or whatever, and then it was translated from that, and he's writing it in archaic because it was, whenever he came back from the expedition. So the words are strange, but he's describing these houses or housing or something like that, but he says that they're all made of stone. All the roofs are gone. He seems to think that the roofs may have been made of wood, but they're all gone or whatever, and there's just blackened stone, and like the place burned or something. But they're all kind of freaked out because, I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere, and you're 9 years into the jungle, and you're climbing this mountain or whatever, and then there's a fucking city in the mountains, and it's empty.
Freaking awesome.
But they didn't expect it to be empty. They thought people lived there, and you could tell by the way they're writing it. They sent 2 scouts down to meet the inhabitants, right? And he says, and they waited for days. This is what sometimes I think I'm like, I'm not understanding what his distances are. Like, how far away was this city? Like, why did it take him 2 days to come back, right? But the scouts come back, and he describes them as being visibly like upset and somewhat like fearful, okay? And they come back, and one of them was, he described him as being a like quote unquote Indian tracker, okay? So presumably a native guy. That guy said, not only is there nobody there, there's no signs that anyone has ever been there. Which makes it, so the way he's writing it, you can tell that what he's saying is like, so no one's been there in a really long time. So it's been so long since anybody's been here that all signs of habitation are gone. The buildings are still there, but there's no footprints. There's nothing that would make you think people were recently here or even anciently here, right? So then he starts, after that happens, there's a bunch of people in the party or whatever that just start arguing. They're like, whatever, you're full of shit. They think the scout's trolling them or whatever. They're like, okay. So they decide,
freaking trolls.
We're all gonna
even existed back then.
Right, back then, stupid jungle trolls. So they all decide we're all gonna go down to the city, and you're gonna be shown to be a troll. So they go down. They go down into the city, and he tries to describe how they tried to explore some of the buildings, but they were, they're made of massive stonework, and there's no, if there were anything soft, any wood, any other types of building materials, those are long gone, and so you're just left with these like massive open, stone edifices that like where everything echoes all weird. And he says that like the ghosts of our own voices chased us out of the buildings. Is what he says, right? So they're like obviously freaked out, and and they start to understand that like, yes, this
I wouldn't be scared if I was there. I would have gone in there. Just take me into the jungle and find a giant ancient
maybe the worm ate
city.
the scary parts. It's like
I would have gone down there.
Yeah, so he's trying. So as you're reading the manuscript, and you can look this up, Manuscript 512.
I would have been scared.
Yeah, when you're reading it, you get the idea. Like, okay, that would be pretty eerie. Like, it's hard. It's hard to like we have archaeological sites that are ancient that it's obvious people were there. Yeah. So how do you have
still eerie?
Huh?
It's eerie being like even on like a just an Indian mound.
Or even like we went to, what was that place called down on the border with the ghost town? It's weird.
Oh yeah, Shafter.
Yeah, Shafter. All these buildings are adobe. They're like 100 years old at max, but you're still like, whoa, these are good abandoned buildings. So the whole manuscript basically, if you go look it up, it's a fascinating read, except for the fucking worm. But when you read it, there's all these little details in there. Like he talks about this great. Okay, so they're walking along what's obviously the main thoroughfare, the big main central road that went through the town, and that was a continuation of this path that they found going up. So it does seem to have been a purposeful road. But he says that as they were coming to the entrance of the town, there was this great. He described it as a gigantic arch, right? So on either side of the road, there are two huge pillars, and then it arches way high up over top of the road, and then on either side of that were two smaller ones. So the triptych, which is a very classic, the two small arches and then the one big one in the middle. It's called the triptych. Like churches have that. You'll see that. Yeah, it's a worldwide for some reason a sort of entrance construction. But he says that at the top arc of the big arch were script characters of some kind. He said that they were too far and too faded. It was too far up there and too faded for them to really copy it down. But he said that they had a rough representation of what they thought it was. But then later they find other script carved into stone that they actually got rubbings of. Okay, so alongside of Manuscript 512, there are script representations of this supposed text that they found. And when you look at it, you can see like that this was alphabetic. It was not hieratic. It wasn't like hieroglyphs, like where you have symbols that make up a whole word. Right. It was alphabetic. They had very simple, like there's a right angle and a left angle, and stuff like that. So, and an alphabet is supposed to be technically more advanced than a hieratic type of symbolic script. Anyway, the whole, I could sit here and read the whole thing. It is so fascinating. All the little details in there. Like he talks about how some of the buildings are so immense that they're beyond belief. He said, like they're just huge, gigantic constructions. And he's like, is this a single house? He described one as being a manor, right? He's like, so there's this manor house. It's kind of fronting the central square plaza of the place when they come to the middle of the town or the city or whatever. And there's this, on one corner is this huge manor house. I mean, he described it as being just absolutely gigantic. And they go inside and there's like verandas and it's multiple stories tall and he's like, is this a house for one person or one family?
How long ago was this?
It was in the, let's see. It was
because it's obviously not been found again.
Right. The city, this has never been, this is why it's so fascinating. Like it's obviously this is a real document. It's not a hoax, right? The document itself is not a hoax. And the person who wrote this down is the guy who was sent on this long expedition that disappeared for so long. The question is did he really see this stuff or is this jungle madness coming out? But I don't know. Most people tend to think that it's, I think what I've seen people say is like, he's the right guy. There was this expedition. He did go on the expedition and he was the leader of it. But what he wrote down is bullshit. And
this is in the Amazon.
Yeah, it's in Brazil.
They're still finding stuff there. I mean,
right, but nothing like this. Like what they found there are there's huge earthwork forms. So underneath the jungle, when they clear the trees away, they find these gigantic rings.
Yeah.
With and basically huge symbols or whatever. Not that looked like there was construction there, but whatever was on top of it's gone. Like so, if you build a house, you make a sort of a flat platform to put the concrete on. That's what's left. Like everything, including the slab, is gone from these buildings that are found in the Amazon. But you're right, the scale of them on some of them is huge. I mean, the earthworks there are gigantic. But this is something else entirely. Way up in the mountains, like Peru, you have these rock carved places. You can't even call them houses or cities. You look at is that even a different building from that part over there? Like they're all connected and there's water running through everything. Because that's what he describes that there's the mountains there have glaciers up at the highest spots, up in the Andes. So there's always water pouring off melting off these glaciers. So right, so
global warming's stupid ice.
That's why the plumbing in Peru still works. Like you have these cities that have been abandoned since who fucking knows how long, Yeah, I mean it's actually the same deal as what he's talking about. There's not even any signs that there has been any habitation there. It's just this crazy stonework on an immense scale with water coming through everything and turning, it's doing weird stuff too. It's getting directed in little channels that are hiding underneath other rocks and appearing in weird places and just pouring out of stones and, so they're doing all this amazing shit, but it doesn't look like anyone's ever actually used the place, right? Except that this place, he says all the rock was blackened like it had been burnt. But I'm like, okay, would it still be black after thousands of years? I mean, you think it would wash away? I don't know. I mean, it's very strange, but it's a fascinating.
Could be lichen too that made it all black.
Right. It could. Yeah, you're right. It could be a patina of a kind. But the manuscript itself is just absolutely fascinating reading. It's
what's it called again?
Manuscript 512.
512.
That's right. Of course.
Yep.
Of course, it's 512.
Where do you find that?
I knew it was called Manuscript 512. I just typed it in Google and it, bam, popped right up. Go to the Fawcett. This is what made Colonel Percy Fawcett think that there was a city, this advanced city in the jungle out there that he disappeared looking for, the famous explorer that disappeared out there.
Has it been 10 years?
It's been 100 years.
Damn it.
To order of magnitude. But yeah, it was one of those classic deals where he gets his son who also believes in he called it the city of Z, right? The lost city of Z. And he believed that he had been out surveying the borderlines of Brazil, all these countries down there, and he was like the last great English explorer, he got the pipe and shit, and he's just like, and he goes out in the jungle, kick all these natives' asses and kick these trees down, and he survives everything, comes back, and everyone in his expedition is dead, but he's like, I'm fine, give me a whiskey, I'm going out tomorrow, And so he becomes obsessed with this idea that in one of his journals, he talks about how he camped with another native on a hillside where at night, and the native had him camp here for this reason. At night, he saw there were stone towers that stuck above the trees on other hills, and he said that at night the tops of those towers lit up with a purple light, like that there was some eldritch fire still happening in them, like something lit them up at night with purple. And then he said the natives were terrified of them, that they would not get any closer than this hilltop where you can see them off in the distance, and that sort of ghost glow that happened to them at night just scared the hell out of them.
So that's kind of similar to the other story about the lit up,
Yes.
mountaintop or whatever.
Yes, it all seems to be connected, and so Fawcett believed in this city in the jungle, though, not up in the mountains. He thought,
Right.
And he on his final expedition, he took his son and his best friend, and they got to the last place where they got to the final camp of his previous expedition where he had stopped there and had to turn back, called Dead Horse Camp, because he had to shoot his horse. He was so sick he was like, going home. I'll be back tomorrow.
Dang
though. Yeah. So he called it Dead Horse Camp. So they made it to Dead Horse Camp, and they had a couple of guides that had gotten them there. He sent them home because he wouldn't force them out. They were terrified of whatever he was trying to find. So he gave them letters and everything, all the and said, okay, you guys can go ahead and go. So that was the last letter we get from him. And he's like, we're here. We're definitely going to find it. You have no need of fear of failure. And he's never been seen again. So
Commander Fawcett finally ran out.
that's right.
Stopped running.
That's right. Somebody turned that faucet to off.
And no one has leaked anything since.
Damn it. No leaks from the faucet. So people think that maybe that he had knowledge of Manuscript 512, but that doesn't make sense to me because they're not in the same place. They're not even looking for the same kind of city. They're not in the mountain, But maybe that reinforced his concept of there being, because in his day, the idea that there was even a village of any kind of advancement out there was just dumb. Like they considered any natives that lived in the jungle to be on at the very base level of technology.
Base level of butt flap.
That's right. Barely even butt flap wearing. So, but he had a couple of artifacts that he thought that had been given to him by various friendly natives that he was like, these are from this place. And there's some pictures of one of them, a black statue that seems to be standing on some kind of platform, and it's not recognizable. How you could.
Aha! The statue is black.
Just like those buildings.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's probably fungus. Fuck.
Dang it.
But yeah, the base it's standing on seems to have some symbols in it. And it's made out of some kind of shiny... It looks like obsidian, but it's not. I mean, it's real shiny, polished, black, marble-looking stone, but it's not obsidian or whatever. And it disappeared with him, so the photo doesn't really tell you enough. But really, the manuscript itself is just absolutely fascinating reading for anybody who wants... I mean, you can sit down and you're probably going to read it in 30 minutes. It's like maybe 20 pages. And then, you get to skip the worm parts because they're gone.
Freaking wormholes.
Yeah. So if you want to read something really fascinating but also incredibly frustrating, go read Manuscript 512. The scouts returned and they told us they had found it. So then we left that place and we went to the next place. We went, fuck. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. There's several, there's stories like that where people they think that they've got.
It's really serious. It's bugging me right now.
Whoa.
Oh, commercials. No commercials.
That was weird. Why did YouTube just pop up on somebody else's phone? Okay, so the idea of lost cities, like there's the Shambhala, in the Himalayas. You know what I'm talking about? What is it? Shangri-La. Never heard of that?
I've heard of the STP album, Shangri-La
yeah,
Di Da.
Shangri-La. Yeah, so Shangri-La is like the mystical city of the gods, of the heavens, are hidden somewhere in the Himalayas. And many people have disappeared looking for it. Over 100 people, it's estimated, I think it's either 100 people or 100 expeditions have died or gone missing looking for Fawcett. You know, not looking for his city, but going to look for him, for any signs of him and his expedition. They did 100 people, you know, dead or gone since he went out there. So there's. I remember having a discussion with one guy that lived in Brazil about this, and he said, I think that indicates there is something, because what that means to me is that there is a native tribe out there that knows about it and they protect it. And so anyone who gets close, of course, you know, they and more recently there was an expedition looking for the just signs of Fawcett's Trail, and they found a group of more friendly Indians who had encoded into their oral traditions a story of a white explorer who showed up, and he was alone at this point. So he had lost his son and his friend, but he shows up, and they told him not to go the direction he wanted to go, because there was they described it as the that there were people there that were just absolutely deadly, and they just did not, you know, there was no trying to talk to them. They fucking kill on sight anyone and everything.
It kind of sounds like, I mean, it could be some native tribe, like you're saying, some butt flap guys.
But it could also be, yeah.
But like in the story of Gilgamesh, you know, when they're looking for
guardians,
they're looking for the city of the gods or whatever.
Yeah. Amidst the cedars.
Yeah, they go, and there's a guardian there that just freaking kills everything that gets close.
Absolutely.
And they somehow kill it. But
because it's Gilgamesh and Enkidu.
Yeah.
Sam Squanch. And
super badasses. Sam Squanch. And it's just his sidekick, Snake.
That's right. I mean, Enkidu was like 8 feet. And
yeah, he was a Nepha.
Right. He was a hairy Nepha. And then Gilgamesh was 3/4 Nepha.
Yeah.
That picture of him, like, you know, basically like choking out the 2 lions, one with each arm. You're just like, all right. So yeah, you can kill monsters. Okay, why is that image so famous in the ancient world? I mean, it's in Peru. The thing with the guy with 2 lions. That's global.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so in Peru, in Pumapunku, there's a you know, in all the various carvings there or whatever, there's one where it's very clearly, it's sort of Mesoamerican looking, but the guy is standing there and he's got 2 lions and he's, you know, and they found them just all over the world. There's the holding the 2 lions out like
2
this,
lions,
smashing them together. Yeah.
So in going back to Egypt, there's
Samson is very close to the the dude, the strong man with the lions.
Going back to Egypt, though, there's supposed to be, or supposedly, 2 sphinxes.
Yes.
Right, and then in a lot of the carvings, there's the 2 lions, and they're facing each other, or whatever.
Yeah.
2 lions. 'Tis a mystery. I must solve it.
Yeah. What was Samson's? Where he thought he had got a mystery with the honey or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're too dumb to figure out my riddle.
Yeah. I thought it was some brilliant riddle. I'm like, that's got to be symbolism. Yeah. He kills the lion or whatever, and then later
like let's not skip over that. He kills a lion with his bare hands. The lion's like, round. He's like, no.
And then later he comes back, and the bees had made a hive inside the carcass of the lion.
Which is weird, because bees...
Yeah, and so then he gets honey out of the belly of the lion, and he's like, haha, my riddle! Yeah. What happens when one kills lions? Where does he get the honey? Yeah. Or, I don't know, it's weird.
So, where you read it, you're like, that's not a good riddle.
It's like the Tolkien riddle, the Hobbit riddle. What do I have in my pockets?
Yeah. What does he have in his pockets?
That's not a freaking riddle!
It's not a riddle. It's not fair.
Let me see. You have the Eye of Sauron in your pocket.
And 2 pence. And a toothpick. Broken in half yesterday.
Great riddle. Next.
Next. Good at these. I'm good at these.
But I like, speaking of riddles, like what the classic riddle that the Sphinx asks, right?
Yeah. What walks on 4 legs at dawn, 2 legs in the afternoon, and then
3 legs in the evening.
Yeah.
Man.
And
man.
And see, that's processional. One day is the 72-year life of a person.
Yeah.
And so it hints at precession as well.
Interesting.
Wow, I just realized that just now.
Hey.
Blew my mind. Blew my fucking mind.
4, 2, 3. Damn it.
What? Oh.
I was thinking
Almost,
4, 3, 2,
almost.
4, 3, 2, 0.
Yeah, so we didn't explain with precession. You have the age, the period of each of the 12 ages. Each one is 2,160 years. Well, two of those together is 4,320. So you'll see the 432 motif in terms of numbers all over the ancient world. It's not as ubiquitous as 72, but 432 in various permutations. Like the way that they seem to have done it, the number of zeros after doesn't matter.
Doesn't really matter.
So you'll see 72 billion, and that's 72 because the zeros are just placeholders to them. So they'll encode it. Like if you look at the Indian Vedic texts that talk about the universe in terms of Brahma. So you have one day of Brahma, and they have all these like billions of years that go by. Every single one of them is precession with a shitload of zeros after it.
Right. Well, 720 is 2
Right.
rotations.
Yeah,
right? 360 times 2. 720, 72.
And 144. You see 144 a lot, which is 12 times 12.
Right. But with 4320, one of the coolest connections with that number in Giza is the Great Pyramid. The distance between from the base of the pyramid to the top,
to the apex as it would be if it was completed.
The 52 degree right if it was complete.
Yeah.
From the base of the pyramid to the top is 1/43,200th of the polar radius of the planet
Right. So
Earth.
it's a circle drawn from North Pole to South Pole to North Pole.
No, the polar radius. In other words, from the center of the
the
planet,
radius. Right, you're
center
right,
of the planet to the North Pole is 43,200 times the distance between the base of the pyramid and the top of the pyramid.
Right.
And if you measure the circumference of the pyramid, the four
At the
sides
base.
at the base, that is 1/43,200th of the circumference of the Earth at the equator. And both of them are to a ridiculous degree of accuracy. And they're taking into account not that the Earth is a perfect sphere, but that it's bulging at the equator.
Right. And
due to its rotation.
like listening to Randall Carlson, like he talks about the way it seems to be a projection that they understood that the Earth is a sphere. And so when you look at a map, a map has to have a spherical projection. So it usually looks like an orange peel that's been spread out, so it's got these weird V's at the top and bottom, like the peeled sphere or whatever. But he talks about how if you put a grid on the Earth, it's going to be a spherical grid. So every square is not going to be quite square, right? As they approach, as the lines approach the North Pole, they get closer together. So if you take any square out of that, it's going to have, it's going to,
It's going to be like a trapezoid.
Right. The northern width is going to be different from the southern width if you're in the northern hemisphere. So he shows how the tiny discrepancies
in the distance of the sides of the pyramid
sides are matching the same. It's the same differences of the square of latitude longitude that the fucking pyramid is on.
Right.
Like
it's ridiculous.
Shit.
And we've gone 7 minutes over. 7.
7. All right. Well, that's good.
7 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah. So the pyramid also has the speed of light in it.
Quick.
Yeah, it has the. So if you're looking at it and you can just see two sides of the base, if you take that length, and you add them together, that is the distance that a point on the equator of the Earth moves in 1 second due to rotation.
Yep.
And yeah,
Mind explosion.
That's right.
Not looking at that.
Can't even talk anymore.
Giant triangles.
Made of stone. You can actually
Snakes.
find that phrase in Ancient Aliens. Giant triangles made of stone. I recorded it. I was like, this is awesome.
Thanks for listening, you guys.
That's right.
Bill.
Episode 5 coming up is 66666.
Episodes.
We'll talk about evil and darkness and dark gods. Pray to the dark gods.
That's right. See you next time.
See you next time.
But we won't.
Snakes!